We are live. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here for the April edition of Insight Sessions. I am Jason Griffing, OneVision's Director of Product. And again, very excited to have you here today for what promises to be a fantastic discussion with Paul Starkey. Paul is something of a living legend in the CI industry, so we're lucky to have him. He's been a driving force behind many big companies and initiatives such as ELAN, Bravas, PrepTECH, amongst others. Paul's a business architect, a growth coach, a serial entrepreneur with a proven track record here of helping individuals and businesses really unlock their maximum potential. Additionally, Paul's now stepped outside of the industry, which I think gives him an even more unique lens on the question of what this channel gets right and what it is that we too often miss. So today's conversation will be all about unlocking those insights and helping you come away with a better understanding of what it takes to win in the CI business. Paul, thank you so much for being here.
Jason, I just love being here.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you.
This is
So
gonna be fun.
I'll give just a quick few bullet points here about what people can expect, and then we'll jump right in. So some of the big topics that we're going to attempt to cover today: what actually drives growth, and where do businesses tend to break? What to watch for in private equity roll-ups. We're seeing a lot more of this in the industry, and Paul obviously has a really unique perspective on these things. How AI, data, and better systems are changing how fast businesses can operate. This is one I am particularly excited for. And then additionally, what lessons from outside the industry can help you build a stronger business. So Paul, I was thinking a lot about where to start today's conversation. You have made the comment to me that far too few integrators look at their business like a true operating system. I'd love to hear you riff on that. What does it actually mean to you for a business owner to look at their company like an operating system? And what sort of things does that really unlock for the business owner?
And thank you. I've been in business, I hate to admit it, 50 years now, since college. And uh, what I failed to see, first 40 of it, maybe, was that there's always a business model behind the business. And we get so entrapped in the day-to-day selling, installing, doing all the things that owners, operators do, that I think sometimes we miss what the real business model is. And I think the more you understand the business model, the better you can execute. We were able to do that with the vital management concept that actually goes back to 2013. So that's incredible. It's been 13 years since that. That's just started with a dumb idea. And the dumb idea was, hey, if we could take profit loss statements and balance sheets and make them so everybody understood it and wrapped it around the business model so people understood the levers better, we could make a difference with integrators. And I just had an idea. It was in my head, floating around my head of, kind of dashboards for dummies kind of idea. And met Steve. Steve was already doing great work. He was my integrator. If you read the EOS stuff, there's always a visionary and there's an integrator. And I've been so blessed to have great integrators with me. So I mean, that was, I would point out to that. I would say the business model and understanding that. I've been able to look into about a dozen different industries now, and it's always fun to do the discovery to figure out, how these businesses really work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that point about you being the visionary, having an integrator ties to a broader kind of meta point of just like understanding who you are, right? And what your strengths and what your weaknesses are. And I think that's like such an important part of being successful in business because we all have strengths and weaknesses. And I think identifying those and then making sure that you're looking at your role in the business and doing everything you can to align the things that you're working on day to day with your strengths, and then getting people around you to really augment the areas where you're not as strong.
Yeah, no one person can do it all. I mean, if you end up being a one person business, you're not going to scale. So, it a lot of it is knowing yourself, knowing your limitations. And, for me, I'm just not a repetitive task person. I love the challenge of solving problems. I think every great business starts with solving a big problem, and so I that's where I like to live. And we'll get into AI
Yeah.
later. Now that
Yeah,
AI is
definitely.
here, it's really keeping me from retiring. So
Yeah. Yeah, I look forward to that. Before we go there though, I do want to jump into, so you've mentioned the word scaling a couple of times, and demand generation, figuring out where the business is coming from, what problems are you solving for customers, how do you get in front of those customers and drive that demand. I know you've shared with me that you perceive this as something that too few integrators are really paying attention to. We do have a unique business in the CI channel, and that a lot of our business does come from referrals through builders and architects and designers. But what's your mental model for this? I mean, how do you encourage integrators to think about demand generation, marketing, and really scaling the business from a growth perspective? Because it all starts with generating more demand. You can't scale a business unless you have more people to sell to.
it's been interesting because I've been on both sides of the equation. I've been on the B2B side, the business to business side, and business B2C, which is business consumer. And when you're on the B2B side, you don't think too much. I think about the demand side of it. There's pretty finite set of targets. When you get over to the B2C side, the instant thing is, well, there's so many people out there, I can't really wiggle a needle. I can't really I can't build a brand, a big name brand, and that kind of thing. So, what has been interesting for me coming out of the CI end of it is most of the business comes, like you say, from another source. Somebody else, we're all almost drafting off somebody else's client. Somebody has already got the ball rolling. And for many integrators, it stops there. It's just don't know how to do business development, maybe don't even have a clear sales process in place. Some of it is, hey, customer on lot 39 needs a quote. you know, uh, that's not a lot of demand agitation right there. I've been in the fencing business where we had to create our own leads. I'm now working in a different B2B business with chiropractors. What I'm seeing is, you know, efforts that go into really doing marketing in a way that generates new eyeballs on the brand, new inquiries that turn into proposals and hopefully into projects. So that's I kind of slice the business into four pieces. Demand being kind of the marketing or the market facing side of it. Uh, Sales, which I think are really, that's the conversion, converting the demand into, opportunities. And then, operations and finance, which kind of was my focus at Vital originally. Operations being the install side, if you will, in my book, and then finance being the steward side of understanding the cash and the profit, because those things are two really different things. Um, and I think if you look at it in those four slices, um, you can better orchestrate what a company should be doing or what your
Hmm.
company should be doing. Um, Most people go out of business because of demand, really. I mean, there's not enough demand. In CI, I think demand's pretty steady. Most companies find a niche where they have got repetitive projects coming in. We always talk about RMR, but RMR at the end of the day is a pretty small portion of what most integrators experience. The reoccurring customers is probably the most important thing. Is
Hmm.
that builder or architect or designer or that source of customers continues to evergreen, if you will. That's important. But I mean, it's really managing those four aspects of the business that I found, makes the difference. And those are the businesses that are most challenged when you get to break points. Talk about growth and everything. My first couple of businesses, every time we added about 30 people, it seemed like the whole company culture changed. It would just, you know, when I remember when we first were involved with law, and we had 12 employees. And when we got to about 40, it was like, hey, this is really becoming different. And then we got to 75, and then we got over 100. And every time there was a lot more specialization going on because early on everybody does everything. We used to just hire people for rug burns. If they would make a diving catch on the carpet, you're in. You're part of the team because somebody had to do something all the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. And what advice do you give? I mean, because like for a lot of integrators out there who might be listening to this, adding 30 people to a company is a lot. They may never add 30 people, but the same thing applies if you go from 2 people probably to 5 or to
yeah,
10. And I've been part of, I've always worked in small businesses. I've been an integrator for many years, and I was part of several integration companies that went through this where, you basically double in size, right? You go from 4 to 8 people. And even that is just a really fundamental change in terms of the way the business operates on a day-to-day basis. Do you have any advice or lessons that you've learned in your career about navigating those sorts of cultural and
well, the
operational shifts?
challenges on one end become communications because you're not self-reliant. There's always an evolution where the owner is in the middle of everything in these small companies, and then getting out of the owner centric model where people are empowered to make decisions and things happen without the owner being involved. Those are important stages to get through. But communication is one part. The other part of it is really process. When things are very tribal, everybody has the how to do in their heads. That's a little hard to replicate and scale. So people like Jason Sayon are helping a lot of our
Hmm.
investors in the space learn how to think about process and think about documenting that and replicating it and refining it. I mean, continuous improvement. I don't care where you are on the scale of growing your company. You got to continue to improve. You got to continue to change. And so communications and process are the biggest speed bumps, I think, as you add people. Because some people take instructions very well. Some people won't move until they're told to.
Hmm.
Others are very, progressive, lean forward. I've always loved to work with people who you didn't have to really coach,
Yeah. Yeah.
to do things that were highly motivated, that were able to, because I never faulted people for making a mistake. Now, making the same mistake twice, that's a tough one. But if you don't take the risk and you don't, because we don't always know what a decision will result in. So it's important to get people that are capable of thinking, capable of doing, not getting in the trap of just thinking about things, but actually doing them. I mean, action is probably the best thing in a company because if you act and fail, you get to act again.
Right. Right.
If you
Yeah.
let them,
And I
go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, I was just going to say, and I think the ability to be decisive and also operate in sort of ambiguous environments. Something I think a lot about is like as I look at different people that I work with and different people on my team, is like you have this spectrum of people on one end who need things kind of really spelled out and broken down and concrete, and then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the type of people that you can throw these huge, abstract, ambiguous problems at, and they're able to take that, decompose the problem, figure out a plan to kind of move things forward one step at a time and take that action. And so I think like as a leader and business owner, like you're going to end up with people across different parts of that spectrum, but it's really important to be mindful of it and also to again, take deliberate measures to recruit and build a team around you of the types of people that you want. And I think if you're trying to scale and you're trying to grow, the more of those people you can get who are comfortable making decisions and operating inside of a relatively ambiguous environment feels so critical to me. I'd be curious for your thoughts on that.
Well, one of the things I've witnessed, I've been around a lot of teams, and the best teams I ever was involved with, there was always a little bit of a a contagious attitude to it. So, one person would would lead, the other people would see the example, and it became contagious. Sometimes it's just simple. Sometimes it's just attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've been spending a lot of time on 10x thinking and how to grow businesses, above and beyond. And most of the time, the things that um, keep us from being great are the things we're not willing to do. And sometimes our competitors aren't willing to do it. And that's really the space that if you can get into, if you're comfortable, doing some things that others aren't willing to do, that's where the breakthroughs come. And I think, being too conservative, having, less than always on attitude, those are the things that keep good companies from becoming great. And
Mm-hmm.
um, when you can get the team contagious about that, it just feeds on itself, because those environments have everybody has a high respect for each other. Everybody is pulling in the same direction. I mean, it's fun to win. Let's admit it. I mean, you learn a lot when you lose, but it's more
It's a
fun to
lot more
win.
fun to win. Yeah.
More fun to win. So,
Yeah, certainly. Well, I think that's actually a decent segue into a topic I do want to get your perspectives on here, and that is the, continued uptick of like private equity roll-ups, mergers and acquisitions in the channel. You've been through a lot of this. You have a unique perspective on it, and speaking of winning, right? Like a lot of integrators out there are hoping for a successful exit at some point. And I'd love to hear your perspectives first on this topic. The first sub bullet I'd like to hit under that heading is, if you're an integrator out there and you're thinking about succession planning or ideally maybe being able to sell your business at some point, what to you are some of the key components in the CI business specifically that you think integrators should be focused on if they are thinking long term about, where all of this is headed versus just dealing with the day-to-day business in front of them?
well, it's an interesting thing because we all get busy. We're all sucked into the day to day, and I can't tell you how many integrators, and I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of them, that when I'd ask them the simple question is, you know, what are you thinking about exit? What are you thinking about 10 years down the road or whatever? Most of them said, I don't even entertain that thought. I don't even think about that, because they are busy in the business, right? So it is something that, I've been involved in 15 equity events. Um, I guess my first one goes back to 2000 and probably 1999, let's say, because I was raising venture capital back then. But I would, so I've had 27 years of seeing transactions done and seeing a lot of owners deal with not only exiting but raising capital and growing their companies. And our we have a lot of activity right now, a couple, three or four different, roll up groups going on. We were fortunate enough to be able to execute the Bravas deal, and because I always thought we had it backwards in custom integration. I think we were so enamored with rolling up and getting paid that we missed the preparation stage, which is we spent a lot of time getting the accounting and the operations thing, and we didn't get completely there. I mean, we got far enough down the road where we'd raise $65+ million. Um, and I still think that model is a viable one and a good one. I learned a lot of things post close, though, that you know it's one thing. I think owners should look in the mirror and say, hey, what I want to get, what it's kind of a Stephen Covey thing. Let's start with the end in mind. Where do I want to be? Is it retirement? Is it some level of comfort? I mean, a lot of our companies make good money, so people are pretty fortunate they have money to invest and create nest eggs and that kind of thing. But where do you want to be, and what do you want to be doing? I think those are the questions to ask. And because when you get involved with investor backed buyouts and those kind of things are going to change. I can tell you that. You can get a check, but I don't think most people are all about the check. I think it's more about where do I want to be in life? What do I want to be doing with it? If it is a check, what I want to do with the check? It could be charity kind of things you get involved in. But the important thing is knowing, kind of asking yourself who you are and where you're going, where you want to be. And then as far as the mechanics of it, I think too much of it goes into the valuation and in the deal making, where I think the day after is when it really starts. The day after you sign, to turn your company over, whether it be to a successor or it be to investor group, or you're going to stay and run it, it's going to change. I mean, with money comes a lot of things. My first deal, I made a mistake on where I got the money from. I was so like, I got to get this deal done. I got to get this deal done, that I lost sight of who I was like getting the money from, and it turned out not good for me, the first one. But I learned, hey, it's not, you can get the money from a lot of different people. You have to get it. You have to almost go into it's like, this is a marriage. This has got to be something that's a relationship that works long term. The after is always the hardest. The integration work after these roll up deals are being done, that's the hardest part. It could be hard because you don't fit with what they're trying to do. It could be hard because your people aren't ready to make that level of change. A lot of the things they're going to ask you to do, you could have done on your own if that was your vision. So I think it's the after party that I'm most concerned about with the the roll-ups and everything.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
been doing succession planning, which is usually a strong number two or number three in the company, and it's a well-known, almost family situation in most integrators. And we've been putting those deals together for several companies, and that's an interesting dynamic too, because some of us owners don't want to give up, the reins. We don't know when to quit. I always knew when to quit because I always had something else going on, or two or three other things going
Yeah.
on.
Ready to jump to the next thing.
Yeah, I got bored. So
Yeah. I'd love to dive one layer deeper into the kind of acquisition exit planning question. So really there's two broad things, right? There is making your company attractive for that in the first, assuming it's something you want. I think your point about getting clear about what you actually want and maybe being careful what you wish for is an important one. But we'll put that aside, and let's say there's an integrator who indeed is fixated and is clear on their goal to sell their business. First, there is making your business attractive to a buyer. And I'd love to hear your perspectives, given your experience with Bravas and just generally in these kinds of environments, what makes a company attractive. And then there's getting yourself set up so that you're actually successful after the deal. And same question there. What makes owners and businesses successful in that environment versus the ones that fail? So how do you get set up to be an attractive acquisition target in the first place? And then what should you focus on if you want to
Well,
navigate, the day two, like you said?
most of our integrators have some challenges in getting ready. One is our accounting practices across the company to company, or go out there, pick 100 companies. It's a mess. It's inconsistent. One of the things we did with Vital, and they're still doing it today, is we got a conforming set of chart of accounts. We got a consistent way of recognizing revenue. So accounting is very important. And I didn't say accounting, I said counting. Very important. And to understand what's important from, a valuation standpoint. You know, uh, some of the companies we find there's a lot of personal stuff intertwined in it. That's not good for a third party buying a company. Usually gets adjusted out, but it's also culturally a speed bump. Uh, the you know the things I would say, and Matt doesn't pay me to say this, but I would get involved with a company like Vital. I mean, I think they help structure discipline. They understand the business model. They can get the financials correct. They can identify, people issues if there's people issues, process issues if there's process issues. So having a good story is we're not static. We're growing. You have to be growing in this business, or you're going backwards, basically. So uh, you need growth, you need profit, you need cash. A lot of our companies don't understand the difference between profit and cash, and because of that, there's not they strip the cash out every year, and there's not a lot of cash in the business. Um, Working capital, which is like AR and inventory, accounts payable, those things are out of whack. So having somebody in your corner that helps you get ready, I think, is an important step.
Mm-hmm.
uh, Valuations will be different from whoever's buying. I'm sure Daisy is paying differently than Bravas, that is paying differently from some of the other regional buyers out there. um, I have my theory on what companies are worth in this space, and we've actually done a lot of valuations for companies. Um, Once you get the deal done, then I think it's what you should do due diligence before to know, hey, what are they going to expect me to do? What am I going to have to change? How is the culture going to change? Because when you start to put together, we put together, I think, 12 or 13 at Bravas. There's probably more than that with Daisy now. You can't take disparate, things that happen, and evolved all differently, and put them all together and expect kumbaya day one. It usually doesn't happen that way. People are used to doing certain things certain ways. Things generally have to change. That's fine. Um, I think most companies in our space, as they grow, developing the middle management layer is really critical. Having it not be owner centric. If it's owner centric, they're not buying the owner. They're wanting to buy a business that can 2x and 3x and 5x, in the future. If it's all dependent on one person, that's tough.
Mm-hmm.
Having good ops people, having good install lead techs, field people, having great salespeople. I mean, salespeople are the one I think most of us struggle with. If I wanted to quadruple my business, can I find three other salespeople like
Right.
I have? And the answer is generally no. And sometimes you don't want to clone what you have. What you had was fine, but it's not.
What got you here won't get you there necessarily.
Well, in the sales front, we have a lot of unicorns. God bless them. They're great. They're awesome. They're productive, but it's hard to clone unicorns.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's a consideration. But the things that are going to happen once you do one of these deals or you pass it to a successor, a good successor is going to look at this. He's got to grow demand. He's got to grow conversion. He's got to grow install productivity. He's got to be able to find great people, or have a system where you find good potential people that you can develop, which is what we were trying to do with PrepTECH. You need some kind of financial oversight. I mean, it's funny in our business, the small business, fence business, same way. Most of the financial people are like mother-in-laws or sister-in-laws or wives or family members. It's they kind of know how to do this stuff, and so they're doing it. And let me tell you that if you don't have really prompt, accurate data, it's like driving a car with those sun things they put in Texas, keep your dashboard from heating up,
yeah,
get the
yeah.
car
The sun
blowing
shield.
up.
Yeah,
It's like driving with those still on. It's very difficult.
yeah. Not ideal.
It took me a year in the fence business to get their accounting squared away and getting the right person in there, so we could run the company successfully.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many CI companies are stuck in that mode,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
it's a shame. And CPAs don't know our business. They don't know. I thought I would never be one of those guys. Our business is so much different, but they know it. They know business generically, and there's a lot of nuances in CI and some of these what I call sell and install businesses that you're really missing leverage if you don't understand the model and you don't understand the information you need to drive the levers in the business.
Yeah. Yeah. Devil's in the details. Well, I think that's great advice. I have a couple of more quick questions I want to hit on this kind of broad area, and then I want to shift gears into AI. But these are questions that came in from the audience ahead of the event. So Steve Weber asked if there was anything that you would do differently setting up Bravas for the investment phase you went through. Given the benefit of hindsight, is there anything when you look back at your experiences at Bravas, is there anything you'd do differently?
Yeah, there's a lot of things I did different.
I'm sure there are. What comes to
uh,
mind?
I would say we chased top line, even though we coached the bottom line. We had over a $12 million EBITDA when that deal was done. We weren't as selective as to who should have been in there. So we ended up with companies that were 180-degree out of phase with each other. Extreme luxury companies with people who had grown their business with security accounts, basically, and others that had been low mid market project businesses. I think we should have focused on fewer companies, more aligned, more go to market aligned. That
Hmm.
would have been, I think, a smarter play for us. Um, I wish I would have stayed the first year after the close to run the business. I mean, maybe that's an ego thing, but the system that we had really required a lot of time from Steve and I, and we left day one. We left almost 6 months before the closing, so there wasn't quite the continuity that it needed. So I wouldn't do that again. So I think having some better certification process of who you let in, not just chasing so many locations or so many or a revenue number. Um, Probably working more consistently on assortment and some of the things. We didn't get into to telling the companies, you know, what to spec or what to quote and everything. I think if you're going to run as a company, that's going to happen. It's going to happen. So, you know, should you align yourself with vendors and lines and brands? You know, everybody, oh, I've been this rep's been my guy for 20 years. I can't obviously change. Hey, a freaking speaker is a freaking speaker. Oh, you line up, they all have great margins, you know, pick a line or two and stick with it. You know,
Hmm.
we had companies sourcing speakers from Crestron. My God, you know.
Yeah. Well, those are great. Those are
That
great
sounds
insights. Yeah.
stupid when you say it out
Yeah.
loud, but
Well,
every
no, but I think those are great. Those are great insights for anybody thinking about, we work with a lot of integrators at OneVision. Steve's one of them, multi-location integrators, uh, aggressive growth goals, expansion. This is something we see. And I think like those are really good insights, thinking about the details of consistency in the model. Are you going after markets that are just totally 180 degrees different from one another? What does that imply and so forth? So I think that's good advice. There was one other question that came in I'd love to hear your perspectives on, which came from Grady. And it's, what's the optimum size of a high-end residential integration company? Too small, you can't keep up. Too big, you get bogged down. I'm curious if there is a number that you have in
well,
mind, or how do you think
that's a
about
great
company
question
size?
because
Yeah.
I've probably seen more profit and loss statements, balance sheets than almost anybody on the planet here in this space. And my tendency was once companies get over 10 million, they tend to layer on a lot of non-selling, non-installing layers of people. People's the biggest, expense of the business outside of, the material cost of goods, which, you know, um, that's very manageable. Particularly, it should
Hmm.
be more manageable bigger you get. But the people side becomes a little harder. That's what difference between a $1 to $2 million integrator and a $3 to $5 million and a let's say a 7 to 10 and a 10 to 15 and a 15 to 25 is really the people and system side of it. And I do think there's probably a sweet spot, and it's probably changed a little bit. I've been out a few years, and we've been through a period of inflation. But it used to be 5 to 6.5 million was probably a good spot where you're going to be making a million to you know 1.5 million. Some could even do better on the bottom line. So I think that's a great healthy business, particularly if you got reoccurring sources of new customers and that kind of thing going. Um, Most companies over 15 start to shrink their bottom line. Doesn't make sense to me, but
Yeah.
it happens.
Yeah.
I've worked with many $20 million and over companies that I look at it and say, man, you guys are walking by $2 million a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of
Growing top line, but the bottom line is shrinking.
Yeah, well, and they start to justify it in a lot of ways. I think I don't think it's ever about the top line. I think it's really about you need to pay your people well. I mean, I think if it's the people that make the business. So, the owner making profit at the expense of his people, I got issues with that.
Hmm.
But I think if you're paying your people well and you're being responsible, running the business. I, I don't know what year it was, but I realized I don't want to be in a business I can't make 20% profit on. you spend so much time and energy and everything into it, risk capital into it. Why would you want to make less than 20%?
Hmm.
And there's a lot of people going out there, oh, I'm at 5, I'm at 6, I'm at 7, I'm at 8. What is he saying? Yeah, I'm saying it's there. It's in this.
Yeah.
We had guys making 25% net in this
Wow.
business. We took dozens and dozens and dozens of company from low single digit, 2 to 6% profit to 18, 19, 20, 25%. So, it's understanding the model again. It's being willing to pull on the levers.
Yep.
Anybody making less than 10% in this business is underpriced.
Got it. Well, I think
I,
that's a really good framework for people. And if you're way under that number, it's something aspirational to, to understand what's possible. I'd love to shift gears here in the time we have left and talk about AI. So you've dropped a lot of knowledge here and wisdom, hard-earned wisdom. And I think, AI is arguably a way like I'm listening to this call and I'm thinking if I'm an integrator, I'm taking a recording or transcript of this call immediately after, and I'm dumping it into AI and I'm giving it a bunch of context about my business. And I'm saying, let's start talking, build me a framework and help me unpack all of this and map it to my business. It's insanely powerful at these sorts of strategic questions. And you've said to me specifically that if you're somebody who's in business strategy and you're not spending an hour or two a day in AI, you're probably falling behind. So I'd love to open it up to you to just talk about your use of AI and specifically in the context of an integrator who's listening to this conversation. How do you use it as a lever to get to the next level in your business?
It is such an accelerator. I mean, it's lighter fuel, I think, for yeah, I consider myself a business architect. That's a title I prefer these days. So, I spend probably close to 3 hours a day uh, with AI doing various things. Now, I always have 4 or 5 irons in the fire, so I can just kind of hop, skip, and jump from them. But the speed and the depth and the clarity and the iteration ability of AI to refine ideas um, and deliver execution plans, because the thinking part sometimes is the easy. It's the doing that separates the winners from the wish I would have done that type. So, I if you're not using it, you need to use it. And I'm not one of these where I have 5 different platforms. And when I start coding with AI, somebody shoot me because
Take
yes,
you out behind the shed.
yeah, I'm not going there. But
Yeah.
in terms
Mm.
of playbooks, in terms of strategies, in terms of pressure testing ideas and that kind of thing, in terms of generating visual concepts, whether it's PowerPoints or it's infographics or whatever. It to me it just helps communicate concepts so much better and faster. I'm almost like an AI junkie now, I guess, because I you know I've never had an assistant. All 50 years of business, I've never had a personal assistant, and so I use it that way. I use it for all of you know my strategic laying out of businesses. I'll feed it spreadsheets at times to help have to check its math a
Yeah.
lot, but it's great. I think it's something that every business owner should have. I think it's something you should learn how to use it better. I'm still a novice. It's probably equivalent to my Excel and Word and PowerPoint skills, which are, remedial at best. But it's very useful.
It's a tool, right? And yeah, you learn how to use it to solve the problems that you're dealing with, and that's all you need to do. I'm going to launch a poll here, by the way. So everybody who's with us live, I'd love if you could take a minute to fill out this poll, which is just trying to get a gauge for where everyone's at in terms of AI use in today's audience. So we'll give that a few minutes. And while that's coming in, there's a couple things, Paul, that you said that I love to react to. So number one, this idea that like, hey, I'm not in 5 different tools. I'm not using Claude Code to go build custom software. But it's clear to me from this conversation and others that you and I have had that you're very, very bullish on AI. And the thing that I would encourage people to take away from that is it doesn't have to be complicated, right? Like you can get in there and just use it in simple ways that can still be like incredibly effective. And then the other thing that I've observed that tends to surprise me is how few people, yeah, at least in my circles, understand AI's ability to act as that strategic thought partner. So people will sometimes, I'm a big AI guy, and people will ask me like, what's your favorite AI use case? And honestly, like I feel like my answer is kind of boring, but it's like I use it to like get in and learn about new things. So if I have an idea for our business at OneVision or an idea for my department to solve a specific problem that we're grappling with, AI is my first port of call every time now. And it's, hey, here's this idea, maybe here's some additional context about the business. Let's just unpack this together and help me think about it. And that just back and forth, that dialogue can really help you get a better lens on the problem, look at it from multiple angles, and then at the end of it, come out with some sort of concrete deliverable, whether that's something that you talked about, like an execution plan or a brief that you're sending out to your team to say, hey, here's an idea that's really fully fleshed out. So I think these kind of like strategic analysis and using it just as that thought partner within your business can be just so impactful.
Well, and the other thing I would mention, we kind of didn't get too deep into this, but I've been able to use it to develop a more comprehensive view of whatever business, like almost an operating system from front end to back end for the business, which I think sometimes we have such an isolated use of things, very specialized, use case that we're looking at. And I think if you will allow it to iterate and reiterate with you, you can get some really, really key insights as to how to build an end-to-end system, starting with demand, working through conversion, working through install, working through finance, and it accelerates your learning so fast and deep. And anybody who's kind of critical of the same people that probably said, I don't need email back 20 years ago. I remember being in a CES meeting, and so people were just saying, hey, I got an email address. This is gonna really be cool. My partner says, I'll never use it.
Crazy. Yeah. Yeah, and it does feel like AI is becoming that, right? It is just going to be table stakes where there's a lot of dialogue and conversation around it right now and a lot of excitement. But I think sooner than later, it's just going to be expected and something
Oh.
that you're just using. And I think it's there's lots of conversations about AI and how it's going to completely transform business and displace jobs and so forth. And I think those are important conversations. And I think
Nobody's talking about the other side of it. How many businesses is it going to create?
the opportunities, exactly.
The
Yeah.
way that it generates code, there's going to be a application explosion. There are going to be business explosions. I mean, the entrepreneurial life is going to be 100x with AI. Now, the jobs it's replacing are the redundant, little bit, I wouldn't want to be in that job for 50 years, but
Hmm.
I think there's two sides to it. I think one is all the opportunities it's going to create. Um, I'm sure the blacksmiths felt the same way, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, times are changing. Yeah, so it looks like 78% of attendees here who answered are using it daily, about 22% occasionally, and then we had 0 in the aware but not actively using it or not using it at all.
well,
So that's
I never use it as a replacement of Google. Not that I'm a big Google guy, but a lot of people use ChatGPT just as a search engine. I rarely do that. I write massive prompts, and I always write them in Word first because I can correct them the typos. But if you're not using it to write like big healthy prompts and getting really deep juicy stuff out of it, most people can answer the trivia questions.
Yeah, yeah.
Using
That,
it in a purpose-driven way, I think, is is
what does one of these prompts look like? So, an example, maybe you have an idea for a new business model or something like that. Talk to me just at a high level about about your process.
let me see if I can recall a recent one. Recently, I was invited to consult a brain instrumentation business that sold equipment that did 5 tests to test stress and your response and basically your nervous system, the internal condition of your nervous system. I knew nothing about, still know much about it, but so I said to my girl, my girl is called Grace, by the way.
That's your AI, your
Yes,
name
my
for your AI.
AI.
Yeah.
So I said, Grace, I said, we're a business architect. We have to figure out what we're going to do. This my friends actually own the business, and she sells the equipment to chiropractors. That's her channel. So I said, Grace, you're a business architect. Yeah, this is what you got. Let's develop a growth plan from them. I suspect that the data that we get out of this instrumentation is not well understood by the practitioners, and we need to make that simple. And kind of went from there. And
Yep.
basically, she caught it right away and said, "Hey, this is a blades and razor blade, or a razor and razor blade strategy.
Hmm.
The money isn't in the equipment. The money is in the analytics, the data, and the reporting. Turns out they have 10 years of data that's stored locally that if we got it to the cloud, now we can have normalized results. So essentially, the concept that came out of this is we could create brain work like blood work. Everybody goes, maybe once in a while gets blood work done. If you're diabetic or something, you're probably going every quarter. You get your cholesterol, you get all your A1C,
Right.
you get all your blood makeup done. This is like a brain workup. So that whole concept, simple concept, exploded into a whole operating system where now we're offering to the chiropractors this data analytics with the intelligence to interpret it, not only collect it and classify it, but interpret it. And then by creating brain patients, because they're usually just have pain, oh, my back's hurt, I gotta go to a chiropractor. Now they're attracting more patients, they're adding more services to those patients, they're keeping the patients longer. Now you got a cubic, a three-way dimensional growth. I mean, all this came out of this one
Yeah.
prompt. I mean,
Yeah.
it was like,
Big
my.
unlock. Yeah.
And
That's so cool. I appreciate you sharing this specific example. And I think it generalizes so well, right? You pick any challenge in your business, any problem that you're trying to solve, yeah, new market you're trying to expand into, build more relationships with builders and architects, like you name it. Just go in there, be thoughtful about how you're prompting it and the context that you're giving it. Get down into the weeds, give it a lot of detail, and then just watch the magic happen, right? It's pretty cool.
yeah, and I mean, it goes back and forth, and you'll go 100 miles an hour down a cul-de-sac. You have to slam on the brakes and pivot. It's just like real business,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
you know. But I really enjoy it. I enjoy the challenge of thinking and getting through some of these things. So,
Awesome. Paul, well, I think that's a great place to wrap things up. Really appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to come join us. This was a super fun conversation. If there was any parting words that you might have for the audience, again, somebody out there listening to this and really growth minded, wants to get to that next level in their integration business, what would that be?
well, I think read a lot. Um, if you're not a reader, use AI to help you read what's appropriate to it. And I said, take the lid off the jar. I think some of us get trained because of our risk profile, where it's like the flea, only when the lid's on the jar, you only jump just that far from the top. You can take the lid off and the flea's still jumping where it is. I think, just think 10x. Think how, if I got $1 million business, how can I get to 10? If I got a
Hmm.
3 million, I get to 30. Some of that you'll probably get to a point where you hit your comfort zone. But I think a lot of our own restriction is on our own mental acceptance of good is good enough. I'm not going to press on this. I'm not going to push my people. I'm not going to, let them push me. So I think just, adopting more of a 10x mentality. What does it take to be great and be unreasonable?
Hmm.
I think when we become reasonable, we become average. So
Yeah, I love
that,
that. Think
that's
big and never stop learning. I think those are a really good, parting words. So Paul, again, thank you so much for being here. If there's anybody listening to this either live today or on the recorded version that wants to get in get in touch with you and learn more, maybe ask a follow-up question, what would be the best way for them to do that?
yeah. I'm at Paul at Fenco FENCO invest invest.com. That was my fence investing company. That's the best email these
Awesome.
days. Um, I'm on LinkedIn, probably have my cell phone number there. I'm always happy to help people. That's really my my goal in life, is to help people reach their full potential. And if I can help people do that, and they help others do it, then the world's better. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, Paul, thank you again. This was a ton of fun. We'll let you go. Hope you have a great rest of your
thank
day.
you.
Thank you,
Appreciate
everybody,
everybody
for being
showing
here
up.
today.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. And we'll see you all on the next one. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Ciao.